Welcome. It is 3 o'clock. We are getting some handouts, so that's wonderful. Welcome to the session, Learning as a Process, Not an Event, the Life Cycle of Learning. We have Jackie, Marla, and Tim to talk to us this afternoon. Thanks for engaging this afternoon. If any of you want to come a little bit further, closer, they encourage you to do that. I also have a few housekeeping things before we get started, and then I'll let them kind of introduce themselves and get on with the topic. Um, Everybody knows the internet code by now? Anybody need the internet code? Okay, the internet code, you need to be on the Marriott Conference Wi-Fi, so you find that says Marriott Conference, and then it's Pioneer 2022, and that's all caps and no spaces. Pioneer 2022, all caps and no spaces. And I know the actual network that you're looking for says the word conference in it. Okay? It's nice if you silence your phones so that any of your we know everybody's busy, we know everybody's working and attending, but if you could make sure to be respectful that way, that'd be great. I know a lot of you are getting CEUs, so make sure that you've checked in the back with my colleague back there. I know she's also kind of chased some people in the room, including myself. They do want to make sure that you know you have to check in and out for every session, and you should have attended no less than 55 minutes of an hour program or 110 minutes of a 2-hour program to get credit. So make sure you're checking in and out if you need those CEs. If you don't need the CEUs or you don't need the credits for whatever, we still have been encouraged to at least check you in so that we know how many people are participating and we know where the interests lie and things like that. So if you would oblige, that would be great. The CEs will be processed in August and emailed no later than August 31st. I think she told us in the first session not to contact her too much before September because she, for one, is going on vacation. So be patient for your CEs. If you haven't gotten them by September, maybe send an email at that time. If you're not certain if you signed up for CEs, there's a roster at registration. And so if you need CEs and you didn't sign in at registration, that's where they had us initial that we actually needed CEs. So if you need to check that, you can do that. Other than that, I think that's about what we have. So welcome, and I'll turn it over to Tim, and he can introduce.
So good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad that you all stuck around. Hopefully some of you attended the first session with Marla DeVries and Anna Ortegara. Did I get her name right?
Yeah.
Ortegara. Yeah. And so welcome back welcome if you haven't been to the previous session, and welcome back if you were at the previous session. My name is Tim Knight. I'm the Executive Director of Organizational Development and Training for Isaacson Living in Atlanta, Georgia. And this is Jackie Hurt, who is the primary trainer at one of our communities. We have a primary trainer in each one of our communities. The other primary trainer is here as well, Trayvon Johnson. He's attending, so you can catch up with him sometime if you need to. Standing too close. And Marla has already been here for an hour prior, but she's back again to spend the next couple of hours with us. So I'm going to say a little bit about myself and what my background is, and then I'll let Marla, you can talk about yourself, and then Jackie, you can give your info. So I told you my name's Tim Knight. I'm the Executive Director of Organizational Development. The majority of my career was in Maine. I moved to Georgia about 5.5 years ago, and I was interviewed with Andy Isaacson at Isaacson Living, and at the time I was the president of the Maine Culture Change Coalition, and so this job came up in Georgia that he was designing a model of care to be a household model of care. And my history in long-term care was always kind of going into old communities and retrofitting culture into the buildings. So when I had the opportunity to actually move to Georgia and be able to open a building that was built to sustain the household model of care, it was like a dream come true. So it was a great experience for me. Like I said, I've been there 5.5 years. I've been able to work with the team to really develop a different model of care. The basis of our care is the household model of care, but we also have a very emotionally feelings-based model of care built on top of that. So that's how we train our employees, and we really talk a lot about, the emotional well-being of our team so that they can really, if they're feeling supported, they're going to provide a really high level of care to our members as well. And you're going to hear Jackie and I talk members. A lot of people talk residents or patients or clients. At Park Springs, we consider everybody a part of the family, so we call them family members. So that's, well, we are now so used to saying that term, the culture of the language of culture change. We just use that term. So you're going to hear us say that a lot. So Marla, if you want to turn your mic on and.
I will. So welcome everybody. Marla DeVries. I am the Chief Learning Officer at the Greenhouse Project. I've been with Greenhouse for almost 10 years. Prior to that, I worked out in Utah for an organization that had 5 nursing homes. I started off my career as a long-term care ombudsman, spent about 9 years as a resident advocate, and then really cut my teeth in culture change as an ombudsman. Was able to be part of the first Eden Alternative Associate Training in Michigan, became an Eden educator, an Eden mentor, kept learning more and more about culture change, and when I got the call from Susan Ryan to join the Greenhouse team, I jumped on it. So I'm thrilled to be here. And the first time I met Tim and Jackie was via Zoom. And we're like, sure, we'll work together on a project, and it's really been a joy to get to know them and to hear about all the wonderful things that they're doing at Park Springs. So glad to be here. Here we are. And if you don't have handouts, I will get you some.
So my name's Jackie Hurt, and I work with Tim with Isaacson Living as a primary trainer for our Park Springs community, which is in Stone Mountain. And I joined the organization 5.5 years ago, right before Tim. I came on board as the Certified Dietary Manager, Food Service Director for Healthcare to help build the household model of care kitchens, design the programming for they're personal chefs in each kitchen, but we call them homemakers, and kind of suckered my way into this role. When it opened up, I decided that was going to be my new job because I wanted to affect change on a larger scale than just in food and nutrition. I've been in that for about 30 years. I was ready for something new. And Tim and Andy had a lot of faith in me, and so now I get to help write all of our programming. I do a lot of our research and author most of our training along with Tim and present it. And I absolutely love being able to take people who are disenfranchised from traditional model of care, who are tired of doing this the way we've been doing it for all of these years and who are ready for a change, and meeting them at a place that maybe they're ready to leave the industry, and capturing their hearts and letting them know that there is the better way to do things and that we're going to love you through it. And we're going to make life better for everybody in the process. So it's a little about me.
Awesome, thank you. So, sorry, this is going to happen. I'm like losing my voice. I've been losing my voice all day, so it's a great time for that to happen. So we posted a poll on the app, and the question was, what are your key learning objectives for this session? And the answers that we got was being open to new ideas, sharing ideas. That's what the Pioneer Network is all about, sharing, networking, really looking at things differently. Obtaining new information to take back to the community to share. Again, that's one of the key philosophies, taking that information back and sharing it with your teams. And we hope to give you some of that information to take back. building on the training that you already have. I know everybody's got a training department or someone responsible for doing your training. If you can take this information back to them and give them a little bit more support around providing that training and how we provide that training, super important. And we're going to talk a lot about some just strategies around how we can do that and how we can really look at our training programs differently. And that's what our whole module is about here today, is really how can we look at our training modules differently. And also one of the other comments was engaging the outliers. So how do you get everybody on your team involved and how do you bring them on board? And we're going to talk a lot today about conversational learning. That's how Jackie and I teach every class. So when we think about these huge classes here, it was a little challenging because we really, when we do our spirit training modules, it's a conversation. We bring our team members in. We allow them to give us feedback on how they're feeling and really what makes them successful in showing up every day to work. So feel free, chime in, ask questions. We want you to ask questions. We want this to be conversational. We want to be able to have you take something valuable away with you. So I'll hand it over to you, Marla.
There's our session objectives. I'm not going to review them, but you see them up there. And as Tim mentioned, we do want this to be a conversation. I apologize that we ran out of a couple of the handouts, but all of them were uploaded, so you can get. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for sharing, because we will have time that you will be working on creating your plan using this framework of learning as a process, not an event. So spend a few minutes, and if you're at a table by yourself, you can have a conversation with yourself if you want, or I encourage you to gather with others and spend a few minutes talking about what's the purpose of training. And if you are in the session last time we talked about that, at its best, what do we want training to be able to do? What does successful training look like? How do you know when training is successful? And then what should it look like? And how do you know when it's not hitting the mark? So take a few minutes, have some conversations, and then we'll get some feedback. I'll give you about 5 minutes.
All right, I'm going to have you guys pull back together here. So Marla's going to go with the mic, but just to answer that first question, what is the purpose of training in long-term care and assisted living? Can I get anybody want to volunteer? Compliance. Any other answers for me? To assure knowledge base. Okay. Go ahead.
To make sure that those working in a long-term care facility really understand the goals of the organization and that they can meet the needs of the elders who live there.
Go to this table right there. Let's see what their answer is.
Maybe staff development,
Staff development.
helping them advance
Yep.
in their personal career.
This is similar to the one in the front, but it's preparing our teams to carry out our strategic initiatives.
Perfect. So at its best, what do we want that training to look like? What does that training need to look like in order to be successful?
I'm getting my exercise.
I think it would look like the people who wanted to learn would help develop the learning technique, what they wanted to learn about, and then help them follow through to the end. And that means they're putting it into practice.
So
Every
getting that
day.
input from your team on
Every
what
day.
they need.
Yes, yeah.
I'd like to see, or I like it when there's give and take, there's interaction and contribution and questions being asked, and when there's learning from the students and from the facilitator.
So how do you know if that's successful? I'm going to ask you that question. Sorry, Marla. Hold on.
I'll make it quick. So I think at its best, we want buy-in, of course, from management, because without that, it's not going to be effective. I think intentional and transformational as well.
So I asked you a question and then we cut you off. Sorry.
Well,
If I take this off, we're going to make
no,
noise.
that's okay. Well, I would know is if students or the participants, attendees were asking questions and were contributing. I mean, that I would hope that at its best, I want that to be the training, and so I would know that's happening. They're not sitting quiet. These days, it is difficult because I don't know if they're playing solitaire or reading their email on Zoom. I don't, and they don't. In some classes, they can't. They're muted, and so they can't talk. And using the chat box isn't always so. You don't know.
Way in the back.
I think the literacy level would be that we wouldn't assume that people understand concepts or whatever, and that people had fun at the training or through the process.
So I'll just ask that question again. What does that look like if it's successful? What does a successful training look like in your organization? How do you gauge that?
I think first you have to start off with something that's measurable. It has to have specific data involved with it. So, say for instance, if you have a high level UTIs, if you have to go through a catheter cleaning process with the staff training, application, show it again, go back another 30 days, look how many you have, go back another 30 days, look how many you have, and watch it decrease over time. If it continues to increase, it's probably just a practical problem that someone just doesn't want to learn the process. So it has to be measurable.
Right here, Marla.
Having the participants be able to teach it back to you.
Return demonstration, so having them teach it back to you.
You got one. Okay. I'm like, I thought you were pointing.
Yep. I find a training to be successful when the people who are in the training go out and talk about it. And so then, hopefully, if I've done my job, the people who are coming again have heard about it and they're excited to be there.
Mm-hmm. We had a comment up here earlier that I thought was really pertinent. So let's grab Nancy first.
I don't know what I said. What did I say?
How it feels.
Oh, I think the training's successful if when you walk into the facility and you meet the members or the participants, whatever, you feel it, you know it. I mean, you have the sense that there's community there and everybody's communicating, feeling the needs of everyone.
And when we talk about feelings-based care, that's pretty important when you walk through the door.
Oh, I guess long-term, that it's actually put into practice and it's supported and then that there's follow-up, continually follow-up, and that everybody in the team or the organization understands those principles and can put them into practice together.
Getting everybody on board. Getting everyone on board so that you're having a consistent message throughout the organization. Okay. I think we've kind of covered
So that's the ideal, right? Are we living in our ideal world right now? No, maybe not quite.
Probably not.
Right. So let's talk about our current reality. So you might have seen some of these statistics before. Anybody seen the goldfish one before? No, most people haven't. Okay. So if you can't read it, it says, this was a Microsoft study. And this was pre-COVID, so I wonder what it would be at this point. But it says the average attention span of a human in 2000 was 12 seconds. Right now, and I believe that was probably maybe 2009, 12, something like that, it's at 8 seconds. And the average attention span of a goldfish, I don't know if you've ever watched them, but they say that that's 9 seconds. So what does that say to you? Do you agree with that? And think about that with training, right? And I find it for myself. I'm like, in the last 2.5 years, my attention span is not what it used to be, right? So we've got people that we've got to pack a punch quickly or we're going to lose them, right? They're going to be, especially, you talk about being on Zoom and they're muted. It's like, right? And we're pretty good at some of the fake, right? Fake listening. Anybody know what that number 344 is? Guess. That is the average number of times Americans check their phone a day. What do you think? Are you above the average, below the average? Yeah. You're above the average, But, okay, we've got a lot of people that are admitting to that. That's about once every 4 minutes, if you do the math. Okay? Yep. So attention spans are reducing. Do you know what that 1% is? That's not the percent of our brain that we're using. No. But we will get to retention. 1% is the average amount of time typical employees have to devote to training and education. 1% of their time. I want to make sure I get the stat correct. So that is average of 24 minutes a week. Now, that's not long-term care specific, right? But that's not a lot of time. We get 1% of people's time for learning. And then you put all of those things, which, like I said, are non-nursing home, non-long-term care, residential living, and then you add on to it the staffing challenge. And so this was the ACA study, which says the percentage of homes that feel they're fully staffed. If you can't read it, it's 1%. 59% feel like they have a high level of a staffing shortage, and you know it, you live it. So our current reality, we've got our ideal, but we've got our current reality. So now let's talk about training and learning in your organization. What does it look like now? And if you were in the last session, we talked about this a little bit. But just use your outdoor mom, dad, grandpa, whatever voice. Use your big person voice and just shout it out, because I'm tired. So what's training like right now? Read and sign. I'm sorry, but I didn't understand that. I know. Read and sign, right? We had a little demonstration in the last session, right? Check the box. Online, right? So impersonal, and therefore we're not really sure what are people grasping. Right. It's part of our plan of correction, or it is the, right. What is the number one plan of correction that we write? We will in-service the staff, right? So it's reactionary. It's not purposeful, not meaningful.
It's a lot about orientation of the hours of the day and the process, but not about culture.
Right. It's about what do we have to do. Yes.
HR training right into their hire.
Right. Anything else? Right.
Can you jump back to the 1% of the time that people train?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what management formally carves out for that?
The
Not necessarily what self-training is.
The study, and I don't have it written in my notes, but 1% of a typical work week is all that 1% of a typical work week is all that employees have to focus on training and development. Right. What would you say in your organizations? So it's 24 minutes a week. What would you say that is? I was going to say, really, when you think about it, that might not be that bad. 24 minutes a week, that's multiply it times 4. I'm not going to do that math, so you tell me what that is for a month. Right.
How much time you have to subtract?
Right. So in terms of what we would say is purposeful and, the important work, right, it doesn't leave a lot of time. So we titled this Learning is a Process, Not an Event. What does that mean to you? So it's got to be continuing. Michelle?
Yeah, so I recently told our CEO that people shouldn't come to the Michelle show. Michelle's giving them information and tools to bring back. And when I go to a campus and nothing's been done,
Right.
I feel like my wheels have been spinning for no purpose. And so now I have the ability to kind of hold accountable and really work with the team at the local levels now. Because stop coming to see me for entertainment or a free trip,
Right.
and then go back home and get back to work as usual.
Right.
And as the educator for a 12-campus organization, it can get disheartening at times.
Right. Absolutely, and it piggybacks on what you said. It's like, so when we get them in the class, then we try and just ram it down their throats, right? Because this is our one opportunity, and then we expect them to retain. And I was going to talk about this later, and I heard that it was mentioned in another session, but the forgetting curve, are people familiar with the forgetting curve? So Ebbinghaus, and this was back in, I think it was 1885, he did experiments. And the amount of information you lose after 24 hours, do you know how much it is? 90. What's your guess? So I got to find my notes to make sure I got it right. After 24 hours, after 1 hour, you lose 65%. So you think about the Wonderful Michelle show that they go to. They're losing 65% of it within the hour. Within 24 hours, it goes down to 70%. And then after 6 days, I've seen different statistics. It's anywhere from 75% up to 90% gone. So if we think we're going to solve things, and if we think we're going to really change our culture 24 minutes a week at a time in this classroom, and then not change anything else, we're kidding ourselves. So, what's that definition of insanity? Is if you keep doing the same thing and you expect different results. We've got to look at learning differently. Learning is not about what happens in the classroom. It's about so much more.
You know what you were just saying about expecting people to go back and share with other people what they learned? I just wonder if when people are hired, if that expectation is shared with them. They say, they might think, well, I'm coming to do a job, but do we tell them part of your job will be, we're a learning organization and we learn from one another. Do they know that expectation? Because a lot of people want to go, they don't necessarily want to go back and be someone else. I don't know.
Yeah. What are those expectations? The session we did previous to this one, we really talked about learning as a whole organization's responsibility. And we said, have we tied the classroom to the value that it brings to the organization? And is it very clear that when you leave, this is the expectation of what you're going to be doing when you go back to work? And this is the result we expect to see, and this is the value it's going to bring to the organization. I don't know that we have that conversation with people. The expectation on them is show up for the class.
Even before that, when they're hired,
Yeah.
that they know that's what we're about.
Right, so it is about, we need to change those expectations for the learners, for sure. So you have a handout, and on the top half, it's the one that's a single sheet. It says, learning is a process, not an event. How would you assess the correlation between the ideal of what you want training in your organization to look like and accomplish, and your current reality? So just take a moment. One extreme, one side of the continuum is the ideal and the current reality are at opposite ends. We know where we want to be, we're nowhere near that. Or are you somewhere in the middle? We've made some progress, but we have a ways to go. And then finally, no, we're living our ideal. So take a moment and fill that in, and then write just for yourself some notes of why you're scoring your organization that way. I'll give you 2 minutes to do that. Do we need more? Do we need more? That's all I have. Give you 1 more minute. I know. What are they saying?
We've got Wheel of Fortune.
Yeah. So the bottom half of that worksheet is what you see up here. And I want you to take a moment and identify for your organization what are the top 5 reasons that keep training from working at your organization. So just put some check marks in the boxes. Give you another 2-3 minutes to do that. So if you're willing, just raise your hand if you look at the 3 columns. Whoops. If you had more checks or X's in the left column, just raise your hand. Okay, a few people. In the center column, raise your hand. A couple people. In the right column. Ooh, a lot of people with the right column. All right, I want you to keep these 3 columns in mind as we go through the remainder of our session. So I'm going to show you a graphic here. So this is typically the distribution and investment of planning, design, and effort for a typical training program. Again, this is outside of long-term care. Much of this research comes from this book. If you are a trainer or an educator, I highly recommend Courageous Training. It's written by Tim Mooney and Robert Brinkerhoff. It's been out there a while, but I think it's just great information. It really has changed how we approach learning and growth at the Greenhouse Project. So, what do you think of that? 10% of our time and resources is spent in pre-training initiatives. 85% is about that classroom event, what happens during the training, and then 5% is related to post-training. So compare those numbers to your organization. What would you say? Similar? Different? Similar, okay. So if you can see the correlation, the left column, those are related to pre-training. The middle column is related to things that happen during the training. And where most of you raised your hand, the post-training, right? So that's where things don't go as well as they could. So what do you think, if that's the reality, what do you think the ideal is in terms of distribution of time resources? Even, so 33%. Okay, someone else, anyone else? Yeah. 60 in the post-training and then 20 in the other two? Okay. Any other guesses? This is what they say. 40% pre, 20% of our investment in resources during the training, and then another 40. So what we're going to do now is break down what does that mean? What is it in that pre-training that really needs to happen? And how do we use adult learning principles to maximize, and Tim talked about that conversational learning for the during, and then what are those post-training events that we can do? So I'm going to turn it over to Jackie to go through those pre-training.
Thank you, ma'am. So currently now, what kind of pre-training is anybody doing? Is anybody doing anything before you start your training class except saying to a CNA, next week you're in training for a couple of hours, you need to show up here, bring your lunch. So pre-training would be, I guess in the current mode, would be just what I said. We do this training, we need you to show up. Well, in the ideal world, it is. Yeah, and that's what we're moving towards. So I'm just curious what people are doing now before people go to training classes. I like that. Does anybody start their pre-training? Oh, go ahead. I have the lights in my eyes. I feel like a star. Go over here.
Preparation, basically. So, oh, thank you. I don't have to yell. So what we do is we from the very start find out about the learners. So how many years of experience do they have in caregiving? What's their role? What's their future role? We work with care homes, basically. So we know what their experience is as instructors or facilitators. And then we also find out even how many hours per week are you working? Because that affects how much time they can commit to the work that they're doing, because oftentimes they aren't given time. It's different than a lot of other situations, but and then we actually will have them watch a video about, there's a handout that goes over some of the schedule, the expectations, what to expect, how to reach out to us, to really give people support along that learning journey. So that's traditionally typically what we do in our training.
I can use my microphone if you want for her. We can do that. I'm just going to come real close to you. Hold on.
Okay. At my village, what I do, if I have a new topic we have to learn, I go right to the front line, I ask them. We have this situation we have to learn about, how can we go about making it happen? So they help me plan the session, so that way they're more apt to be, want to be included or want to actually join it. So I ask them, how can we make this successful before I plan anything?
I like that. Does anybody start training right at the interview, pre-training right at the interview process? Like when somebody's coming into your organization and we're welcoming them in with an interview and we talk about our culture and who we are, do we say, these are our trainings. This is what we are going to provide for you if you join our team, and set the expectation right from the interview process? Yeah. Well, that's what we do at Isaacs and Living. but I went the wrong way. So pre-training. So we want to get people prepared for what's going to come. We want them, before they walk in the door, to know what they're going to have, what the outcome should be, and what we're going to provide for them. So we want them to know what it's all about. We want them to have all the information about the training and the information about the content and about anything fun that we might be doing, and we also want their input. We want them to know what's expected from them in the training. We want them to understand that when they come in, they are going to be expected to participate, to be a part of the process. When Tim and I do training together, we also invite our participants to, if there's something that they feel uncomfortable with, something that they're uneasy with, to have a conversation with us about that. And the beauty in that is that it's made our training really fluid to meet the needs of the people that we're training. And we've actually trained people, we've done training sessions, and then changed our training mid-session because of some of the feedback that we've gotten. And that's also really important. And how does this apply to the work that I do? How is this training going to support the mission and vision and value that you find in your job? So we want people to know all of those things. Tim and I think that it's really important that beforehand we send out lots of information. So we send out some information on what it looks like to be an effective learner, what the tools and skills are. Because a lot of our team, they've not been in an educational situation in quite a while. So we want to prepare them again for what it's like to be a learner. We ask them to think about their own personal beliefs and their own values. Why do you do the work you do? Why do you wake up every morning, hit your alarm clock, yell at it maybe, but then get up, take your shower, get dressed, and show up in the place that you show up to do the job that you've chosen to do? Because we want to connect the training to their mission, their vision, their values, and their purpose. We also supply them with information about being open-minded, because none of this is going to work if people aren't open-minded. We need to make sure that people understand that we're going to challenge them. We're going to challenge your beliefs about what you think about elders. We're going to challenge your belief about what it means to be a true care partner. We're going to challenge your beliefs in what life should look like for people living in care, for what elders, the choices that they make, and how to really be supportive of them, whether or not you agree with them or not. So we send out lots of information, and we have lots of conversation about that. We also supply training commitments. We send these out ahead of time. And it's not just training commitments from the people participating. Tim and I have training commitments to people. Something simple as, we're going to be on time. We're going to silence our phones. We're going to be, one of the best ones that Tim and I have, I think, is that we're going to be compassionate guides through the process. We are going to be available to you whenever you need us to have these uncomfortable conversations, or if you need more clarity. And we have certain training commitments for the people in the session, saying that we're going to be on time, we are going to participate, we are going to ask questions, we're going to contribute. What are some of the other ones that are in our training commitments, Tim? Because he just rewrote them, so.
Well, one of the most important ones for me is something that we've already talked about, is establishing that they are expected to take that learning back into the households with them, and that they are expected to be a defender of our model of care moving forward. So it's really, that's where they get that information, is before they even come into the class, this is what is expected of you in your role as a care provider in the household.
Thank you.
You know, it occurs to me it's such a statement that the CEO is delivering. I don't know how much you're there, but just.
Well, I'm the executive director, but I do participate in the training. Well, when I talked earlier too about the emotional side of the training, for me, I love being at the trainings because I really get to know the team. We do a whole day of sharing our life stories. And when I'm there, I get to share my life story and people understand, why I show up the way that I show up. And then if Jackie is coming in and she's having a really bad day, I can understand why she's showing up the way that she's showing up. And I can support her through that. And then tomorrow, she's going to support me. So it's a very, having those conversations, and you're right, it does make a difference having an executive director sitting at the table, hearing people's life stories, and being able to understand how they fit into the organization.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna, because you said CEO, I'm just gonna acknowledge that our CEO for Isaacson Living is sitting at a table in the back of the room. So hi, Andy. I'm gonna drive the bus now. But Andy has actually been through our training 2 or 3 times. He has sat in the room with associates and other members of leadership and done the training because he believes in what we do. And he wants all of our associates and all of our team members to understand that he knows what the ask is and that he's willing to be vulnerable to that ask himself. And that's such a huge impact on the learning process, because when you're in the same room with your CEO and he's sharing some of his life story with you, all of a sudden he's not the CEO anymore, he's Andy. And we're back to that same level and we understand one another, and it's really impactful. So, to your point, it does make a difference who's in the room.
So when you think about the pre-training portion of this, what's the goal? Why does the stat say 40% of your effort should be spent in pre-training? Okay, so you want buy-in. What else? What are we trying to accomplish with these pre-training things that we've been talking about? Excitement, eagerness, awareness, right? For them to be a sponge, and I can't remember if we said it in this session or just the last one, but how many people come to training and it's like, I just was told to show up. They're not ripe, they're not ready. Mm-hmm.
This is great, but I don't need another in-service on this again? We're good?
We get constant feedback in our sessions because we ask for it. We invite it. We have conversations constantly. Like I said, Tim and I, I'll just share a real quick experience because I know we're out of time, but Tim and I were doing a training with a group of leaders, and one of the videos that we were showing ended up causing some unintended stress for certain members of that group. When the word got back to us, we stopped the training. We had the conversation with the whole team, with the whole group. Like, why did this hit you this way? We want to understand, because we certainly don't want anyone to be offended, leave this room feeling like, we're pushing something down your throats that makes you feel uncomfortable. We want to know from you your feedback. And I don't know, we took maybe 30 minutes that day and we discussed it. And from that conversation, we found another resource that still met the need, but we were able to say that what the participants brought to us was valuable and that we were going to listen to them, and it actually made the training better for us the next time around.
It really opened up a whole different conversation.
It did. So, meaningful can be in a negative way or in a positive way. Like, this is hitting me in a really negative way. Most people feel powerless in a training session to say, hold up, this doesn't sit right with me. So it's really important to really invite that and be consistent about that message. About if this isn't hitting you right, you have to tell me. So, and then it becomes meaningful because they know that we're going to listen.
It sounds like you do all of your trainings off-site.
Nope.
No?
Nope.
Because I know, in the nursing homes that I deal with, they'll be in middle of a training, and here comes the nurse to say, excuse me, Mary, Mrs. Jones needs you now. So the value of the training isn't there.
So a lot of the pre-work also has to be with the managers and the schedulers. And there's a lot of work that goes in with that because we have to make sure that those shifts are covered. And because we have households, it's, we may have a little bit of a luxury because we do have households and we have a really good staffing structure. But it's up to the people like our guides, our household guides, to, we let them know we're having this training. They schedule their staff, they schedule their associates who are going to be there, they know the commitment, and it's up to them to make sure that there's somebody taking care of that shift. I know, it's hard. It's hard.
So part of getting that ownership in your management is the invitation to the class and making it a special deal that you're being invested in because we see you as a leader and there's that empowerment there. Many years ago, I'm an Eden educator and a greenhouse educator. There was an Eden class where I could tell there was something in the room that was like, something's not right here. And come to find out, the trainer for that campus was just talking the talk. And so we pivoted and had an empowerment moment. Part of the resources and empowerment is human resources and preventing that pull to go work the floor or to go work or because Miss So-and-so needs you shows that they're at the table for a reason and not for now until something else, your regular job pulls you away. And just that whole experience of the importance of that person is so crucial.
And we have that conversation a lot just about the investment that the organization is making in individuals and the fact that, if you go to work at Amazon, they're not going to pull you into a room and have a lovely conversation with you about how you show up every day. That just doesn't happen. So investing that time and those resources into people is such a big deal. And we actually, that's part of our training commitments as well. There's a little blurb in there about recognizing the fact that our organization is recognizing the importance that you bring to work every day. And we're willing to invest time and resources into you because we know how important that is. So it's...
Yep. Tim and I we do this all the time, so really sorry. We might say, well, you're going to do this session and I'm going to do this session, but we end up doing it together. So you all have a worksheet. It's the Learning is a Process, Not an Event action plan and worksheet. So we're going to work on the very first part of it, the very first page, because this is all the pre-work. And so what I'd like, is there a slide for this? No? Yeah, there is one. There's one? Okay, here we go. So I would like you all to just think about a training that you're going to hold in the next 6 months or so. And then use the framework to outline strategies for pre-training work. What kind of communication, the working with the stakeholders, what kind of invitations you send out, and then any pre-session education that you do. So just look at this worksheet for a little bit. And Marla, how much time do we have?
Oh, let's give you a robust 8 minutes.
All right, Marla's going to be the timekeeper. Somebody has to. Thank you for catching me. Yeah.
3 more minutes. Sorry.
I forget I have that mic on. It's my leftover mildew camp cough. Good? All right, I'm taking a minute away. We're going to even it out here. So keep working on your plans for the pre. Think of some things that you can bring into your own organizations around preparing people, getting people ready for the training, getting people excited for the training. One of the other things that I've done in the past is I've done some invitations and I've done some little videos that like kind of explain what we're going to be doing. One of our challenges has been, it's spirit training. So people coming into the organization, they're like, I have to go to spirit training. I don't know what that is. Are they going to preach to me? What are they going to do? Is this a religious thing? So giving them that information up front is really important for us. So just explaining to people and getting them on board and getting them excited about coming to the training so that they're not just showing up like, oh my God, I have no idea what I'm doing. Why am I even here? So moving on to the next part of the learning process is during the training. So how do we conduct the trainings? And like we talked about this conversational learning. There is not one class that Jackie and I teach that we don't learn something from our team. And turn your mic on. We do this all the time.
So I'm just going to interject that Trayvon, who our other trainer, is in the room as well.
Oh, hey,
so
Trey.
I really want to make sure that we include him in the conversation because it's not just you and I learning stuff. Trey is learning as well, and he's part of the process. So I just want to make sure that you acknowledge that.
Thank you. I didn't see him back there. He was being so quiet. So really thinking about how you're going to present that training, what it's going to look like, what are you going to talk about, and also being prepared for the unexpected because like Jackie said, there are many times that we get off topic. Is it a bad thing? No, it's never a bad thing because the conversations that we end up having are probably more meaningful than not. I always look at every opportunity as just a great opportunity to have conversation with people, learn from people and what they bring and how it affects how they show up every day. So posing a question that builds conversation. We're going to do a little exercise in a minute. Drawing from the experiences of the learners. If you're in a class and you have a bunch of experience in the room, you can learn from that experience. I've said before, most of the time, our attendees are the ones that are driving the class. They're really the ones that are are doing the whole training because they're giving us the information, they're giving us their stories, they're sharing their experience. So it really makes a huge difference, you know, to just keep them included. Building conversation through exploration of the topic, getting people curious, asking questions that, you know, get them thinking a little bit differently. It allows the learner to give feedback into the learning process. It allows the facilitators to learn from the learners, the attendees. You know, there have been so many moments that we've just learned so much, and, you know, and most of the time we end up implementing that into our training sessions. So there's no two training sessions that are ever the same. We're always changing, and we always see that experience as very fluid and just you know, keeping it fresh and keeping it new. So these are the two questions that I'm going to pose to the group, and I'm going to give you some time. Marla, how much time do we have? She's our timekeeper. What do you say, about 5 minutes? 5 minutes is good. So think about this first question. What are some of the customs and beliefs about life in senior living care? What are some of the customs? And this is actually one of the questions that we use in our training to get conversation going. And then the second one is, what are some of the behaviors and language that are used in traditional model of care that needs to be changed to support true person-directed, person-centered care? So use the next 5 minutes to just have that conversation among the people at your table. I know this is Pioneer Network, and you guys are already really good at this. You already know the answers, but just to give you an idea of kind of what conversational learning looks like. This? All right. I know. All right, it's been 5 minutes. So when we consider that first question, what are some of the customs and belief about life in senior living? What are some of the things that come to mind for people?
It's where you go at your last place that you're going to be. For the seniors, what happens is they feel that they were stripped of everything. They can't, now they have to ask if they could go with their family or such sort, so it's real hard on them.
Hello, everybody. All right, so the first part of the question, as one of the youngest people in here, on the outside world, in the real world, for people who don't really have this experience, in a nursing home or retirement community, some beliefs that most people would believe that all old people are put in an old folks' home to die. The food is nasty, it stink, and everybody is in a wheelchair just slumped over. So that is stuff that people on the outside world really believe if you don't have this experience. So I'm young, Shannon is young, and we are here to plan for the future.
You guys good? Anybody else? I think we kind of got the idea. But, that question challenges people to think about what senior living typically looks like in a traditional model of care. And also it gives you the opportunity to build conversation about why and how you're going to change that view. So what are some of the behaviors and language that are used in traditional model of care that needs to be changed to support true person-centered, person-directed care?
Hello, everyone. I'm Cameron, and I'm part of Isaacson Living. And we actually, this is new to me when I started with this company, but I love it. So we don't call our patients or residents, we call them members. We give them a sense of belonging, and we practice the household model of care. And we use the spirit training to train all of the staff on how to treat our members. So we really treat it like it's their home. We don't refer to them as room number 3306, or we all know them on a first name basis, and we treat them like a family. And it's very family oriented where we work. We give them a sense of belonging.
Thank you, Cameron. Do you have something?
And by the way, Cameron, you're not old either. I wanted to point that out.
Things that really frustrate me when I'm in the home and walking around is hearing things like your diaper, your feeder, you're a biter. It is very frustrating.
Perfect.
I mean, someone who needs assistance eating, or it's your brief, so things like that kind of infantize them. Infantize the residents, you know what I mean? Or baby talking, that really drives me crazy. So I always correct someone when I hear them using those words. If they're not a feeder, they need assistance with eating, they're not a biter, there's a reason why it's happening. So things like that.
Excellent. And I can tell you that anybody that works with me at Park Springs or at Isaacson Living, the language that we use in our everyday conversation is so important because it forms our culture. And we have to be careful of using those words.
And those words are also very labeling. If you label somebody as combative, there's usually no way to come back from that sometimes. And they might not be, they're not that person. That's just something that's happened, and that's a behavior that there's an emotional need behind that. So.
Hello, everyone. I'm Shannon. I'm also with Isaacson Living. And one thing that I love that we do at our communities is we celebrate individual birthdays. We were just talking about this last night. A lot of times in traditional models, you'll have the one monthly celebration for everyone's birthday, but that doesn't really feel
special. And I might be eating a cake that I don't even like the flavor of, but it's you get what you get at that celebration. And so we really work hard to make it an experience for each individual member at our communities. We know what they like. One man at our community loves varsity hot dogs, and so we got that for him for his birthday. Or if someone's a big chocolate person, we'll make sure and incorporate that. So I love that we do that at our communities.
The Isaacson Living Show here.
I know. Well, I won't go in my spiel, but some of the behaviors and languages I feel that most traditional model of care need to remove is removing the task and the time out of the day. One of the best benefits I know is that we'll create moments for them at that particular time and not make sure we're not telling them what to do at a certain time, allowing that member to actually have an opportunity to express what they're ready to do, not waking them up when they're not ready to get up. We're causing them to be frustrated throughout the day because we woke them up. So remove the time and removing tasks out of the day, I think really improves and it really supports true person-centered care.
Awesome. Thank you. And anyone not from Isaacson Living?
All right, so one of my favorites that we do at Isaacson Living is we do with our members instead of doing for our members.
Perfect. God, I taught these guys well.
This one's not mine, it's hers, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's a good one. She's from dietary, right? Yeah. And picky. Our residents are not picky. They have preferences, just like the rest of us. So I teach CNA classes and I teach the young people, what do you do when you're hungry at night? You might have to ask your mom or dad, but because their age, but you go get something to eat and it's something you prefer and it's not something just thrown at you. So she picked up on the word picky and I like to share that.
Awesome. Awesome. That is very true. So when you think about just trying to get conversation going with your teams, letting them express this, it makes them think. It makes them think differently. And that's what we want. That's what we want for our members. We want to make sure that they are being taken care of by people that can think differently about the care that they provide. And that it's not just, I'm going to go in, I'm going to wash you up, I'm going to feed you, I'm going to put you to bed. That's not what it's about. It's about that relationship-based care, and it's about building those relationships with people based on their preferences and choices, and not labeling them and not taking their independence away from them or filing them away and giving them a number. It's really about allowing them to be who they are, no matter whether they're living in care or whether they're at home. It shouldn't be any different when they come to us. I went backwards. So as the facilitator, and we've already talked about this, posing the question, being prepared with examples to support and drive the conversation, so you really have to know your material. You got to know what you're talking about. Encourage attendees to share ideas and experiences. Really important, because we have so many people that come through our door, either brand new CNAs or seasoned CNAs that have a different story, a different perspective of the care that they give. So making sure that you're including everyone, we talk about inclusion, making sure that everybody at the table has a voice at the table, making sure that their feedback is encouraged. And remember, from one session to the next, no two conversations are the same, but that the outcomes and topics explored are very similar. So, having those conversations, so important, and just building on those and allowing people to share and letting them be part of the training themselves.
So can I interject something
Absolutely.
real quick that we haven't touched on?
You always do.
And vice versa. But we talked about the training commitments, and this just hit me as Tim was talking, because one of our training commitments that we have the participants make and that we make is that it's a safe environment. that everything that is shared is confidential. If it doesn't come out of your mouth, it's not shared outside that door. And you have to start building that trust right from the beginning. So when we're having these conversations, we remind people multiple times throughout a session, what you have to say stays in this room. If Tim and I are doing a training session together, we'll both hear a story or hear somebody's point of view. But if I'm doing a session without him or Trayvon, I don't share that information even with them, unless it has to do with changing a session. And then I get permission from the person. I say, do you mind if I share this information with Tim and with Trayvon? Or do you want to be a part of that conversation? But you have to build that trust. That starts in the pre-work. Building that trust has to start in that pre-work. But then during the session, it has got to be mentioned multiple times throughout a session. And it has to be repeated, and then it has to be taken into action. You have to really walk the talk about being a confidential, safe space for people in training, especially when we're challenging their ideas. So I just wanted to touch
If you
on
can't
that real quick.
maintain that level of safety, you're really damaging the integrity of the entire program, the entire, the entire organization. So
Yep, so I'm sorry. Go ahead.
awesome. I think I'm done.
You have to do the next page of the worksheet. Okay.
No, I'll bring you the mic. We won't make you yell. There you go.
Thank you. And I agree, building trust is critical, especially when you're training something new or different from people's perspective. But what happens during that training session, somebody says something that's really raises to the level of an HR issue? Do you keep it in a safe space and not share that with HR or the supervisor?
We always ask permission. We have a conversation, but we say, that really is something that's more serious than we can let go.
Right, that's what I'm saying, right.
And we ask permission to bring that forward.
And if they don't give you permission?
That's a tough one.
And I think that also depends on each individual incident, like what the conversation is about. If we feel that an associate is going to put a member in danger, has put a member in danger, that's something that we're required as reporters, as mandated reporters, to bring forward. And we'll tell them, listen, you've brought this up. We are mandated reporters. We have got to take this to the next level.
Yep.
We will let them know.
Yeah, so it's not like a mandate, but let's say it's against the culture of your organization. Your organization sounds very similar to ours, and this person is, extremely negative, disruptive, and says something that is really against the grain of the organization, and that really should be reported to the supervisor, HR, or somebody to help work with that individual?
That starts with an individual conversation with that person.
Yeah, of course.
And then, with Tim being the executive director, if something comes up, I always tell that person I'm going to have to share this with my
Good.
superior.
Right.
I'm very honest with them because in this kind of training, when you're trying to change culture, you don't have room for boxing gloves.
Understood. I just want to qualify that because we approach it that way as well. We try to make that safe space, but it's not a 100% blanket thing that you approach that everything you say is confidential.
Right.
Somebody may walk away and say, no, we're doing this, guys. Doesn't matter what the person says, you can't repeat it. So I wanted to bring it up because sometimes these things that come up in training, because we do the same thing. We have a team enrichment director, trains everybody on hospitality culture, 2 full days, that kind of stuff, and follow-up. So these things do come up from time to time, not all the time, but they do, and you got to know how to address it.
Right. And so, if I'm in a session by myself and somebody brings something up that's concerning, I will let them know, I will talk to them off-site or after the session, and then I'll say, I'm going to have to share this with Tim, and then it may have to go to somebody else, and we'll be back to you.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But it's very individual. And, we've even had situations where people have walked out of our training because we've challenged them on some of the things that, we have people come to us that have worked traditional model of care their entire life. And they're like, yeah, I'm not changing for you. And, those are the people that you don't want. So if you want to walk out of my training, that's okay, because we probably didn't need you anyway. So, yeah.
So, as a new trainer, what we try to do is the trainers, we would normally share our story first, and that kind of sort of sets the tone for everybody else. So if we sharing a deep story, what I'm trying to say is we don't make it a competition, basically, on who got the most painful story, or just like he said about race, we don't try to make it a competition on who has the most painful story. So we would share our story first, and it kind of sort of sets the tone.
So the next thing is on those worksheets, the next section is about action planning for the during training actions. So continue to work on that and just pull that together, part of your plan. What do you want your during activities, your during training activities to look like? Do you want it to be conversational, or do you want to stand up and just instruct people and hope that they get it, and not really have conversation back and forth? That's the other beauty of conversational learning, is that if you're having a conversation with someone, you can usually gauge if they're getting it. And you want people to get it. You want people to really understand the points that you're trying to make. And if Marla is arguing with me or isn't seeing really the way that I want her to see, it gives me the opportunity to follow up with her. It gives me the opportunity to say, hey, Marla, I really don't think you were getting that in the training. Why don't you come talk to me? Let's see if we can work this out on the side. And if we can't, maybe Marla doesn't fit the organization, and we need to look at that. So that's when it becomes an HR issue. So have a plan. Really consider what your plan is. I think I pretty much covered all that. We try to get it done within the first couple of weeks, at least the first month. It's always a challenge because we have such a different model of care. You can't expect, it's almost like a marketing thing, you know, it's a bait and switch. You say, okay, here you go, this is how it's going to be, but I'm going to send you out there and you have no idea what you're even going to do when you get there. So we've built it into new employee orientation, so they at least hear a little bit about the model of care, so that they know that it's different, so that they're prodded to ask questions along the way. And yeah, they hear it through the interview process as well. So it's a conversation as you go through the HR process of getting people through the door, and then building it into new employee orientation, so that the worst thing that can happen is they bring their traditional model of care mindset with them when they come. So we want them to know before they walk through the door that it's different. And they continuously hear that throughout the process. So it's not just, this is how we do it here, good luck. The training, that's a great segue. So Jackie, it's Marla. Yes, Marla's actually going to talk about the post planning. So that other, is it 40%?
40%, yeah.
The other 40% at the end. And so I'm going to just hand it right over to you.
Perfect segue. Thank you for that. So let's talk about what's the purpose of the post-training activities. And I actually don't want to show that yet. So why? Why do we say we spend 40%? We should spend 40% of our energy and investment in post-training. What is it we want to accomplish? Keep it alive. We want to reinforce it. So we want the learning. We want them to remember. We want to counteract that forgetting curve. What else? So positive outcomes, and then, right, the application, right? So we want them to apply it, so then we have those positive outcomes. So keep that in mind. That's why we're investing that much time. So just before I get into all of the details with this, what's our attention span? How many seconds? Good. Recall, because that was over an hour ago. How many times do we check our cell phone on average? Unless you're over here, and then it's how many times? Many more times, right? How many minutes on average a week do employees have to devote to training? Look at that, you guys. Oh, that forgetting curve's got nothing on you. All right. So this is where we have an opportunity to get creative, because as most of you raised your hand, it was in this section. Because I think my experience in my work in training, we do the invitation, we do a little bit. I think we've grown a lot in terms of using adult learning techniques to making training conversational, interactive. And then we kind of say, whew, glad that's over, right? Let's get back to the real work now. So I broke it down into 5 main categories. And your handouts, so let me say something about the handout. The worksheets that you have, that goes into a lot of this information. On the app, you guys have given, Isaacson Living has given other like audit tools and tools that they use, but we also have more, there's like 8 pages in there. So there's more detail related to the post-training, so you can use that. So first of all, it's looking at what are those organizational systems? How are we communicating with people? How might we be able to just give a reinforcement in some of the communication tools that we already use? So what might that be? I don't know if anybody does mailers anymore because you probably don't get paid with a physical check, but it could be, emails, it could be texting, it could be just a posting, and it's just something, right? If I put a goldfish up, not that I really care if you remember, but if I put a goldfish up, maybe where you punch in, are you gonna remember what that's about? Probably, right? That's just that little bit of enforcement. Looking at removing obstacles, and we talked about this in the previous session. If you train people on a topic and they go back and there's all of these barriers, right? They're not going to be able to make that change. So we, as leaders, need to be working to remove those obstacles. We need to look at our systems, and do our systems support the education to get us to the outcome we want or not? And then give people permission to practice having that trial ability so they can get comfortable with it. Because, and we had a coaching session yesterday, you're not gonna walk out of a coaching class and be able to, do it perfectly. You've gotta be able to try, you've gotta be able to fail and learn from that, so give people permission to do that. I kind of touched on the technology side, but what are the things, if you have an internal communication system that you can utilize, emails, any other communication methods to reinforce the learning, to ask those good questions. And then, and I think it's something that it's put in the center, it's all about the relationships, the interpersonal connections. So what conversations are we having with people? The previous session talked a lot about the role of the manager. If your manager, if you have somebody going through a class and that manager isn't having a follow-up conversation with them within the first 2 weeks of them going through the class, that is an incredibly missed opportunity. They need to be saying, what did you learn? What barriers did you identify? What's going to be, how are you going to live out what we talked about or what you learned? I believe that's got to happen. Performance support. So when you see somebody not doing what they should be able to do as a result of going through that's an opportunity for a coaching moment. Using peer mentors. So those that have been experienced, that have been through the class. How many people use peer mentors in your organizations right now? A few? I think that's an opportunity. Follow-up, where the educator is going around. So you as educators, you teach a class, do you ever then go do some rounds and talk with people? So a lot of people are doing that, right? Finding out how it's going, how they're able to apply the learning. Tools and resources. So there's audit tools, right? So we want to make sure that we have the impact, and one of the ways that we make sure is that we're doing that evaluation, we're following up. Do you guys want to one of you talk about the audit tools that you use? The nod.
Sure. Actually, the 2 primary trainers is built into their job descriptions that part of their responsibility is to spend at least a day a week in the households auditing the culture in the households. So obviously they need a tool to work with. We've given you a version of that tool on the app, so you can take a look at that. But it's really about just sitting back and seeing, what I'm teaching, is it sticking? Is it working in the household? Are people really hearing things? And for me as a facilitator, it's like, if I hear a CNA say something that I taught them in a class in the household, I'm like, whew, win, win. So, it's about just sitting back and listening to the culture in the household.
Yeah, it's not about being involved in the culture. When you're doing these audits, after about 18 minutes of you being in the households or in your, whatever you call your areas, people forget you're there. You just become a piece of furniture to them. And while you come in the first 18 minutes, they might be like, oh, Jackie's in the household, I have to act a certain way. After about 18 minutes, all of a sudden, they forget I'm there. And the true culture comes out of how they normally work. And it's about observing, taking notes, and then following up. And if it's something that's really, correcting it right in the moment, happens sometimes, but for the most part, we really are just supposed to be observing and then creating action plans so that we can develop different micro-learnings to address it, because it's usually not just one person. It becomes kind of like that domino effect. If one person lets their guard down and lets go of the model of care, somebody else is going to do it as well. And so we have to take note of where that's falling apart so that we can develop the micro-learnings, get with the guides to help us support the micro-learnings, and then be back within the households again, pulling some of those team members out and saying, this is what we've observed, and this is how we're going to fix it, and this is what we expect from you.
Thank you. So how many of you, the next one is measurement tools. How many of you, when you do training, you do evaluations? Probably most, right? What do evaluations typically measure immediately following a training? How satisfied were they, right? Which is good for us as trainers, because we want to get that, did they enjoy it? Did it hit the mark for them? How many of us are then doing a 3-month measurement? Yes, yay. 6-month measurement. So I want to encourage you, it's not just about looking, were they satisfied, but then does it have that impact down the road? And then finally, Jackie mentioned micro-learning. What's micro-learning? Short, quick, right? I hear it's anything from 3 to 5 minutes. Some will say it's maybe up to 7 to 10 minutes, but it's short. It's to reinforce the learning, and especially knowing what our attention spans, we need those quick, just little reminders. So you can, again, use your communication strategies. Post a quick video. You can do just-in-time learning, right? You do the audit, you see that. You can either have that one-on-one conversation, or you can say, you know what, we're going to call a team meeting because this has kind of slipped away. We started doing these webinars, these classes, and then we would do a 1-page summary. Just this quick, we'd use visuals, but just kind of this quick down and dirty. This is what we talked about, and people can reference it. Spaced learning, right? So tomorrow, if I find you, I might ask you, how many times do people, not that I care if you really remember how many times people check their phone, but spaced learning, right? So it happens once a month. We're reinforcing what happens. Apps are another one that's way at the top. So we're in the process of developing. I'm very excited about it. So we have a core training. It's a 5-day training that, similar to spirit training, that everybody goes through in the greenhouse model. And so we have created these, when it's all said and done, it'll be about 100 modules. And it's gonna go through, in about 2 or 3 minutes, an app where they just, oh, this one is about autonomy and control. Let me just flip through it, you know, like we do on our phone, so it's built for the phone. And it'll include a little story about the application and opportunity for quizzes and ways that they can really think about how they apply it. Yeah, so we got to get creative here and pay attention to all of the post-training activities. So your worksheet, we've got 10 minutes left, so I'd like you to spend 5 of those. Go to the 3rd page of your worksheet and go through what are some of those post-training activities that you can do. Sorry. So I don't know that we're going to have time for a learning circle. So you likely didn't have time to fully fill out your worksheet, but I encourage you have homework. That's your post-training. And now that you've all checked in, I've got your email, and so I can follow up and check in on if you did that or not. So.
And she will.
And I will. Yes, yes. That's right. That's perfect.
That's awesome.
So we want to do, if we had more time, we'd do a full learning circle, but we're going to kind of modify it. So Tim and Jackie are going to guide you through that.
So the question for our learning circle this afternoon is, what is one thing you intend to implement or one step you intend to take back to your organization? So what we're going to do is, I think we're just going to do a debrief, and I'll go to each table and you can just give me a couple things at each table, if that works for everyone.
I teach CNA classes, and I was putting a different spin on the 40-20-40 with not a lot of time. I was thinking it would be really nice, and it's always been real nice if somebody would tell them what CNA class is about before they get there, so if I could get the counselors to understand the 40-20-40, but I took it a little further, and even every single day when the students come, I need to do the 40-20-40, so thank you.
That's great.
Do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'm not in a nursing home or a community, but I would so people from lots of different places come. I would like to enhance, or actually implement, some pre-connection with the participants or the learners in some way through maybe a little video. I don't know what, but I'd like to work on that.
Oh, I have so many ideas after today.
That's
and I
good.
can see that I've really fallen apart at the post-training. And so I'm really going to focus on saddling up next to my staff and encouraging them and seeing the boundaries that maybe I don't perceive, but they do. But I don't see those until it's in practice, right?
Right.
So I'm really going to focus on that. I'm afraid of how much time that's going to take, but I'm going to do it.
But it'll be worth it. It'll be worth it.
As we develop our plan for training for the next year, I'm really going to keep in mind the 40-40. The pre and post training is the most important. I think I've always realized that, but I love seeing those numbers to really remind you to plan in that way and put that time in.
Yeah. Gives you some data to go on too.
I wrote it down, no, I don't remember. I think I want to do more of the huddle type before we actually get into a training session. We've used it in another way with volunteers doing the Opening Mind Through Art program. So we do the huddle prior to that and make sure that we've already had training, but then we get the huddle before we actually do the work. And then afterwards, we all get together again and decide, how did that go? Well, I need to incorporate that into some other areas, not just with the volunteers, but with the staff. Yeah.
Sounds helpful.
Well, we do a lot of our training online now, so I'm going to do more person-to-person follow-up to see what they learned that month. We have different courses that are that need to be done each month, so I'll just make sure that I talk to them in person about those different classes that they had to take.
It's kind of turning into a little bit of a learning circle, but that's all good. You're holding the talking stick, so.
To hold accountability among my peers, just to help out and see if they needed the extra hand.
I like the check of the households. We visit different households and make sure that, what they're learning is actually put in practice, and to follow up with that. That's something I would like to put into. And also after the session, I want to chat with you to see what else we can put into practice too.
Okay.
Thanks.
I think something we haven't talked a lot about, but leadership support, making sure that you're training your leaders on holding people accountable in the household, because if we
That's a
don't
whole
hold
other
people
session.
accountable, it doesn't work.
That's a whole other session.
Okay, awesome. All
Um,
right.
I think we're going to focus on that 40-20-40 rule. We do the pre, but just make sure it's actually effective when we're doing it. And we're really good at implementing it, but I think the post is where we kind of lack. Doing the 3-month and the 6-month and the 1 year, that's really important to make sure that they understand what the education was and what went through. So we'll probably bring that to our organization and try to improve that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Stay away from that table.
I know.
I think one area of opportunity that we have at our organization is during our all-staff meetings, and they are being held through Zoom right now, but they can have a tendency to feel rushed, the in-services that we do, and very impersonal because you're on the other end of a screen and it's very hard to connect in that way. So I think one thing that we can do, I know Zoom has features where you can do checkpoint questions along the way, just to make sure people are awake and absorbing the information, and just making those sessions more of a conversation rather than just someone talking at you.
And Shannon, we can talk about the breakout rooms and stuff.
What's that?
I told Shannon we would talk about using breakout rooms and stuff.
I think for me, I'd like to work some more on the conversational learning. While the training that we do in person does incorporate that, I'm not as comfortable with like the silence. So when people don't start to share after I've posed a question, I tend to jump in and kind of move on to the next topic. And I think I have to become more comfortable with that.
Good point.
I think one of the things that I've learned is about, streamlining your approach and when you're getting ready to teach. And I do like the idea of you all saying, come back to ask, like, how did everyone receive the information? I think that's very, very important.
Well, one thing I thought was fascinating is 65% of what I've taught them, they've forgotten the first hour. So, God, that scares me. So I like the idea of focusing more on post-training and make sure to reinforce what they've learned. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to work on the post-training. We have a great communication tool. One of them is we do weekly summaries for each resident, just a couple sentences on how they're doing, and then a little action plan. So it gives us all something to work towards, and we can insert some of these things in there, and then in the action plan we can highlight people that are really implementing it and give them acknowledgement and kind of measure how we're doing.
Thank you.
For me, I think I'm going to start with the action plan. I have to say this was tremendous for me, all of the different components.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You good? Okay.
We're a couple minutes over,
Yeah.
so raise your hand if you want to share maybe.
Do I have anybody else who needs to share? They're burning to share their information. Oh,
Yeah,
good.
Of course, Chris.
I love that. And see, this is the most important. This is the most important part of being a facilitator, is being flexible.
Thank you so much. I really appreciated this. As an educator and a facilitator, I think it just really reminded me of how much the success, I already know this, but if the managers and the people around them are not on board and following through all the time, this is going nowhere. I teach about culture change and person-directed care. And I taught one time, and at the end of the 3 days, we had a learning circle, and one of the nurse managers, the question was, what was the most exciting thing you've learned these last 3 days? Or what were you most excited about these last 3 days? And her answer was, right now, because I get to leave.
Oh my.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, you did not. So I'm like, okay, fired. That's what I would do. But the organization I work for did not do that. So you know what I mean? Like, I think it just reinforces how important that is. So thanks. And you guys rock.
So as we leave today, just be thinking about, you know, that 40, 20, 40 breakdown. And it's just a different way of looking at it. And the more you can look at it differently and work away from this is how we've always done it, and so we need to do it a little bit differently. Whew, this thing is like making weird noise. I'm like in the zone or something over there. So, any further words from?
No, I can't wait to follow up with you guys in a month and hear how your action plans have gone. So thank you very
Yes,
much.
thank you,
Appreciate
thank
your
you.
participation.